Chapter 15. Dazed for a half-second, Anna winced and worked to bring the world back into focus, her staff already assembled in her hands. When her eyes could process the room again, she saw two figures in motion making flex bolt gestures. She reacted instantly as a quick flurry of projectiles flew across the room, deflecting two aimed at her, while a third struck a nearby chair and blew it apart, showering her with wood and cloth. Lisa had put a barrier up the moment the flashbang went off, and 3 bolts exploded against it. Her mind assessed the situation even as her body took action. Both attackers were men, based on their bulky outlines. They wore military fatigues and wielded MMD weapons. Sharp MMD weapons. "Swords!" She yelled the warning as she dodged out of the way of another volley, knowing she needed to find cover and then figure out a way to engage at close range. Her weapon wasn't modded to shoot projectiles. Agency rules prohibited flex bolts, and her modder wouldn't add them. Gesturing to the office beside her, she removed a pane of glass and leaped inside as 2 more blasts of energy crashed into the wall where she'd been standing. As the sound of more bolts crackled in her eardrums, she ducked behind a desk and initiated a connection with her data lens. "Anna, did you get what you were looking for?" "Can't talk now. Uploading files." "Understood." She muted the call, started the transfer, then returned her attention to the room. Lisa had disappeared from view, and the men were advancing, one approaching Anna's office, the other toward the teller line. Anna surmised that Lisa had gone over it to take cover of her own. Her partner's voice sounded from her data lens. "Anna, are you with me?" "Yes, I had to secure the recordings." She checked the upload. It was going, but had a while to go. She didn't have time to wait, but the process should take care of itself now. "Let's take them in 3, 2, 1. Gesturing to take control of an office chair, she dashed forward with it hovering in front of her. At the same time, Lisa appeared on the other side of the room, vaulting over the teller line. In a flash of sparks, Anna's chair shattered into pieces as a flex bolt smashed into it, but it had done its job. Her attacker didn't have a chance to fire another shot before she was in his face, her weapon coming down fast, directed at his head. He moved to deflect the blow, and then they were locked into combat, sword against staff, too frantic and close for projectiles. Anna and Lisa pushed toward one another with their assailants between them, using the space and their longer weapons to drive the men together. When their attackers' backs were about to touch, Anna executed a broad sweep at her opponent's feet, and when he shifted to block, she pivoted and sent a small table smashing into the back of Lisa's opponent, throwing him off balance. As he tried to recover, Lisa rushed forward and thrust her staff into the back of Anna's attacker, driving him down onto the floor with a grunt. Anna kicked the sword out of his hand, then disassembled her weapon, hooked it to her waist, and darted past Lisa. Coming up behind the man she'd hit with the table, she grabbed his wrists and wrenched it hard. He screamed out in pain as she twisted his arm, forcing him to let go of his sword. In a fluid motion, she plucked it out of the air, disassembled it, and stored it on her left hip before taking his other arm and dragging it behind his back. She finished the maneuver by assembling restraints around his wrists and shoving him to the ground. She turned to see Lisa had the other man already subdued. Glaring down at the sprawling figure, Lisa shook her head. "That could have gone better for you." He didn't respond. As the adrenaline of the moment faded, Anna glanced between the 2 men in frustration. She had hoped to keep this excursion into the bank a secret. That plan was shot now that they had to make arrests. She sighed. "Oh, we're going to have to call this in." Lisa's eyes swept the room, now a mess of broken furniture, shattered glass, and holes in the floor and walls. "It's going to require a lot of paperwork." "Don't be so hasty." Anna recognized the voice without looking. Plucking her staff off her waist, she whirled to face Jennifer Zhao standing in the doorway. Zhao wasn't dressed in fatigues like the men, but rather a full black combat suit and a thick backpack Anna assumed was a portable matter container. She had a sword in either hand, each held at her side, ready, but not tensed for a fight. Not yet. Zhao surveyed the scene, eyes coming to rest on the restrained men. Incompetent! Anna hissed at her. Why are you here, Zhao? Zhao peered up at her, eyes cold, a stark contrast from the pleasant smile of Naomi White. She approached with determined steps. I want your data lenses. Anna tightened her grip. You want the recordings? I do. Why? What is it you don't want us to see? Zhao stopped 3 meters away from Anna. If I told you, it would defeat my purpose here. You've been watching us? Of course, I do not underestimate you. After your interference with Ben, I've been studying your agency files. Her eyes flickered to Lisa. Both of you have a long list of accomplishments. Anna's eyes narrowed. You sat by while we took Lopez in, but these vid recordings required this? She waved at the disarray around them. Lopez shouldn't have been so careless as to leave evidence for you to find. Zhao glanced down at the men again. Some people get what they deserve, but she won't tell you as much as you think she will. We prepared for this possibility. It's the calculation necessary when working with incompetent people. Anna marveled at the difference between the woman before her and the one she'd met at the hotel. She'd never have guessed at Zhao's ruthless nature then. You slipped up yourself. You didn't consider the recordings from the bank. Yes, it's true. You were clever to think of the cash machine. That did escape my attention. Lisa grinned, sidestepping warily around to flank Zhao as she spoke. She thinks we're clever. Such a nice thing to say. But Zhao, you must realize we aren't giving you anything. We'll take you and your people in. Zhao's head followed Lisa's movements. You will. You just don't know it yet. You think you can take me because you underestimate my power. She gestured at the men on the floor, like they underestimated yours. I didn't want to get involved here, but there's no helping it now. Without warning, she turned back to Anna and whipped her arm upward in a slicing motion. Anna felt the sting of a cut slicing across her cheek, despite Zhao's sword coming nowhere near her face. She reached a finger up to touch the spot and found it slick with blood. A rush of panic crawled over her skin as she studied Zhao with wide eyes. What did you do? A demonstration of my power, Agent Flynn, something you should now respect. Anna's mind reeled. If she hadn't seen the vid of the sheep, her brain would be rejecting what had just happened. Terror permeated the cells of her body, cells that could be ripped apart by Zhao with a simple wave of the hand. She glared. You have a weapon that manipulates living matter. I do. Zhao responded as if she were a patient schoolteacher watching a student work through a difficult problem. Anna took an unconscious step back, realizing Zhao was right. They were at the mercy of her power. She frowned at the swords. How does a better way have weapons like that? Zhao pressed her lips into a tight line. The same way we acquired the vid we provided Ben Jacobs, the fool. You stole it. I thought the idea was to use MMDs without fail-safes for farming, or is that only rhetoric? Zhao shrugged. Something like that. Replacing the soil is, of course, a nice thought. People do want their food, but some things are more important than wants. Safety, if you understand the hierarchy of needs. She held up her sword, the exhibit to her argument. This makes me safe. It will make you safe too someday, though you can't see it yet. Yet? So you don't intend to kill us? Zhao scoffed. No, I don't kill people, not unless I need to, and what I need from you is your data lens. She turned to Lisa. From both of you. Lisa glared back defiantly. And if we don't, you're going to use that thing on us as if we were sheep? If I must, Agent Williams, I'd prefer to keep you in one piece. Anna shuddered. Fine. She pulled the data lens off her face and held it out. Lisa hesitated, then did the same. Zhao gathered the devices, dropped them on the ground, and stepped on them, mashing them into the floor as she slowly rotated the ball of her foot. She peered up at Anna, her eyes shadowed. "I'll take my leave now, along with my men. I think you have some cleaning up to do." She gestured, and the restraints fell off the man's hands. Without speaking, they stood up and followed as she strode to the bank's doors. Anna realized that Zhao hadn't even bothered to disarm them, which showed her confidence and her power. After they'd gone, Lisa stared at Anna. "She's a psychopath." "She is." Anna inhaled a long breath, let it out, and tried to make the tension in her body go with it. Her stress didn't leave, but something else did, because suddenly exhaustion overcame her. Pressing the end of her staff into the floor, she shifted her weight onto it. Lisa disassembled her own staff and hooked it to her belt, then took a few steps back to lean against the teller line, one hand gently touching her bandage. "Oh, this thing is never going to heal if we keep getting into fights, and this one was for nothing. I wish we knew why Zhao didn't want us to see those recordings." Anna managed a weak smile. "We can still find out. Zhao didn't get them." Lisa's forehead wrinkled. "She didn't?" "No. I uploaded them to my modder as soon as those guys started shooting at us. I figured the recordings must be important to have provoked their attack. Even if we went down, I wanted them to be in trusted hands." Lisa nodded, impressed. "Oh, quick thinking." "That being said, I want to look at them before we tell anyone about this little encounter." Lisa gestured around, their surroundings still looking like something out of a war zone. "How do you plan to hide this? People are going to realize something went down as soon as the place opens." Anna's smile widened, despite her lack of energy. "The power of unauthorized mods. Watch." Standing up straight, she made the appropriate gesture with her staff. Without her data lens to guide her, she found this a bit more challenging, but she got it right, and the room started moving around them. Lisa stepped away from the teller line, lips parting with amazement. Chairs came back together, glass reappeared, and holes filled in to create unbroken surfaces. In a matter of seconds, the bank had returned back to its original state. "You have a mod that can do that?" Anna nodded. "Yes, you have no idea how handy it is. Whenever I enter a new location, a mod on my staff triggers to record the properties of each object it can manipulate. Once that data is stored, it's easy enough to return it all back to the way it was before. It's not always perfect since some elements are too mangled by explosions and such, but usually it can fill in the details with materials from my PMC. I've used this when I've been doing field research. Keeps people from knowing if I've been somewhere." "I think I absolutely have an idea how handy it is. Do I have that mod?" Anna grinned. "You do. I should probably train you on everything we put on your staff." Lisa chuckled. "I admit it. I was wrong. Your modder is fantastic. She needs to add flux bolts, though." "I won't say I've never asked." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "I suppose every modder has her limits." Anna shrugged. "Black Ice's limit is the reason we caught Ben Jacobs." She looked around, satisfied that no one would know what had happened. "I'm going to restart the cash machine recordings. After that, let's get out of here. We have to be careful not to walk in front of it on the way out." "Back to the hotel, then?" "Back to the hotel."
Daniel tried to manage his stress while he sat with Jason at the kitchen table as his son ate a late dessert. He'd attempted to call on his data lens twice in the past hour with no response. Jason paused, laying his spoon down in his bowl of ice cream. "Is everything okay?" Daniel offered a weak smile. "I hope so. Sometimes I worry when your mom's out of town and I haven't heard from her." "The last time that happened was Tuesday." Daniel reached out and grabbed his son's shoulder, giving it a firm shake. "Yes, that was scary, but she survived. She's a tough woman." Jason nodded and picked up his spoon again. "I know. I'm more worried about you." Daniel gave a rueful laugh. "That's fair." A notification chimed on his data lens and he saw that Anna was calling. He answered immediately. Anna. Her voice came through, thick with exhaustion. Hey, honey. It's a relief to finally be able to talk to you. Today has been a long one. So much happened. I had to buy a new data lens, so couldn't call before now. He frowned. A new data lens? Sounds like there's a story there, but I'm glad you're all right. There's a story. She sighed. Is Jason there? I'd love to talk to him. Yes, he's right here with me. I'll loop him in. He connected Jason into the call. Hi, Mom. Hey, kiddo. It's good to hear from you. I miss you. I miss you too. I'll be home tomorrow and can't wait to give you the biggest hug. Dad told me you went to visit Jackson. Did you have a good time? Jason shrugged. It was okay. He went to sleep pretty early. I guess he would. They continued to chat, Jason catching her up, talking about church and a vid he'd watched that afternoon. After a few minutes, he looked up at Daniel. I think Dad wants to talk. And I want to talk to him. I love you, Jason. I love you too. I'll see you tomorrow. Jason clicked off the call and started back into his ice cream. Daniel's mind flooded with questions. You bought a new data lens? What happened? You should get someplace private. But yeah, Jennifer Zhao broke mine. That was a name he hadn't expected to hear. He reached over to touch Jason's shoulder. I'm going to finish talking with Mom in my tinker room. Make sure you do your homework. Tomorrow's a school day. I know, Dad. He stood up and left the kitchen, speaking to Anna as he went. How was she involved? I'll back up. Anna explained the events of the day, starting with the interview and ending with the fight at the bank. When she finished, he blew out a long breath. I'm going to need a minute to process all that. So do I, and I lived through it. He took some time trying to put it all together, but his mind balked. So Zhao really has an MMD that manipulates living matter? Yes, I have the cut to prove it. A hollowness crept into the pit of his stomach. What she could have done to you is unthinkable. Honey, I've never been so scared in my life. She had total power over me. I'm so sorry. I can only imagine it. Thank you. She let out a weary breath of air. I'll be fine. I just want to know what I should do next, or what I'll find on those recordings. Maybe they'll help you figure out your next step. He started pacing, and she sensed something was bothering him. Daniel? Something's wrong. Does it feel off to you? What do you mean? I've been to a meetup and gotten a sense of what a better way is about. They have some bad ideas, but generally they want to do good things. This Zhao doesn't sound like that at all. They say they want MMDs without failsafes for agriculture, but she used it for... She wanted to show us her power. She was clear about that. And that's the disconnect. They're all about dispersing power. Daniel, that's how these groups are. Irritation dripped in her voice. They hook a lot of people who are completely unaware of what they really do. I know. I'm the history teacher, remember? I understand how it works. Lopez and her little group getting Ben Jacobs all riled up makes sense to me. But I think about the demographic at the meetup I went to. Middle-class women and a few husbands they drug along. I didn't see any single guys or anyone else who seemed like the type to dress up and play soldier on the weekends. Throw in Zhao running around with non-failsafe swords, and the puzzle doesn't come together for me. Anna went silent, and he knew she was considering what he'd said. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. You think a better way might not be behind the attack tonight? I think it's worth thinking about. All right, I will. Maybe the recordings will show me something. I'll be looking at them tomorrow on the ride back to Houston. I'm not saying anything for sure, only that it doesn't add up for me. I get that, and I respect your perspective. There's one positive out of all of this, though. I took one of their swords, and am bringing it back with me. Daniel stopped pacing. Anna, that's great. He paused, considering the possibilities. Did you tell Davis? Jada? No. Anna paused. I haven't even talked to her since the encounter with Zhao. What can I say? If she tells Guerrero we broke into a bank, that's one more thing Guerrero's going to hold over me. Daniel felt a flash of annoyance. Guerrero is making this 10 times harder than it needs to be. Do you have any hint as to why she wants you back in town? No idea, but it isn't good. She's been fixated on me from the moment she arrived, and now that we have a solid case against a better way, I'm not sure what happens next. As I understand from being married to you for 20 years, it's a thing called paperwork." She laughed. "That's exactly right." Her brief levity died with a sigh. "I should try to rest. It's going to be a long ride home tomorrow. I'll call you again when I'm on my way." After they said their goodnights and disconnected, Daniel lowered his body into his tinker room chair, ruminating on Zhao, a better way, and weapons that could manipulate human beings. He couldn't shake the feeling that Zhao didn't make sense as a part of a better way, but how did she fit into the picture? He shook his head, uncertain what to do with his unease.
Sitting in the transport car as the morning sun shone in through the windows, Anna loaded up the bank vids and started watching them on the new data lens she'd picked up the previous night. She still had Simon disabled and didn't plan on bringing him back online. What he knew, Guerrero knew, and the less Guerrero knew, the better. This irritated her and felt like betrayal, as if an AI could have allegiances. Without him, she was forced to do analysis on her own, which was both cumbersome and time-consuming. She first determined which Tuesdays had outdoor meetups, finding a half-dozen, all of which happened before January. Lopez spoke at all of them, but the audience varied in number, hovering around 40 people, but dipping down to 20 at one point, and surging to 65 at another. Ben and Shannon Jacobs attended every meeting, which Anna didn't find surprising, considering Shannon's enthusiasm. Once she isolated these vids, she attempted to recreate the audio of Lopez's speeches using her lip movements. This was tech the agency had, but she didn't know if the quality of the vid was high enough. It wasn't. Giving up on that angle, she turned her attention to Ben and Shannon Jacobs themselves. She watched them as they entered the meetings, sat down to listen, then milled around after Lopez finished whatever speech she'd given. Shannon socialized far more than Ben, who kept to himself while she navigated the ever-changing clusters of people engaging in indiscernible discussions. But no, Ben didn't keep to himself. Anna amended her assessment. As Shannon flitted about, Ben appeared to be in idle conversation with the man who had been sitting next to him during the presentation. Flipping through all 6 vids, she saw that Ben sat between his wife and this same man at each one. They didn't look like friends, and Shannon hadn't mentioned him in either interview, but they spoke at the end of every meetup. Anna got an image capture of the man's face, and it was sharp enough to make out some basic details. He was younger, in his late 20s, with short, dark hair and a permanent stubble of a beard, which accentuated his strong jawline. His data lens had a thick top bar and no other frame, a modern fashion she only recognized because Lisa had mentioned it recently. Wearing open-collar, tailored shirts, the man was quite attractive, which made him an unusual companion for Ben, whose tired, worn-out look couldn't have been more different. She thought she could perform an ID search with the quality of the image. Normally, Simon would have done this task for her, but today she had to do it herself. Not a problem. It would just take a bit more time to access the multiple databases. She started with the El Paso Labor Department. The search took a while, and after querying every available public list in the city, she concluded he didn't exist in any of the El Paso registries. Given his frequent attendance at an El Paso meetup, she found this odd. But odd was the point. A tinge of excitement began to tingle up her spine as she altered the criteria, starting with Houston databases, intending to move on to Austin and Dallas if she still came up empty. It didn't take long to get a hit once she focused on Houston, and then she had him. His name was Gary Robertson, and her data lens showed his address, where he grew up, where he went to school, and his employer. He worked for a Houston-based firm named Radon Security as a consultant. That last bit puzzled her. She anticipated someone more significant with all the trouble she'd gone through to find him. But from a cursory glance at Radon's public job listings, consultant sat at the bottom of the pile. She couldn't tell what a radon consultant did, but it wasn't an executive position. Radon itself was a substantial company with offices in numerous cities, providing security-related services across many different sectors. Like other businesses of its ilk, it earned a substantial amount of its profit from government contracts, but it also had tendrils reaching all out across the national corporate landscape, including many companies and organizations that would take issue with Shaw and her pro-Feeney policies. It was a lot to take in and gave rise to numerous questions. But sometimes having questions was better than having none. They meant there was something to investigate. Feeling self-satisfied with the identification, she tried to sink back into the transport car chair, but found it had little padding and thus almost nothing to yield. Assembling a pillow helped a little, but her back still felt stiff, and she rubbed her eyes as a headache came on. Happy but weary, this strange mixture persisted even as her vehicle pulled into the station hours later, a little after 6. Darkness was already falling, and as Anna moved out into the open, the silent, cold air around her pressed in to infiltrate her clothes. She drew her coat in close as she dragged a suitcase behind her, taking brisk steps toward the elevator with her staff handle on one hip and the sword hilt on the other. Guerrero expected her at the agency by 7. She could make it, but needed to make a small stop first to dump the sword. No way was she going to bring it in without knowing what Guerrero wanted from her. She took the elevator down to the 2nd floor, where its doors vanished to reveal a room full of lockers. Long-distance travelers secured belongings here while they were away. She picked her way through a series of rooms, keeping a watchful eye as she went. The station appeared empty, but she didn't want any casual observers noting her presence. When she reached her destination, a door on the far side of the building, she gestured to make a small window and peered inside, scanning the room through her light-adjusted data lens. The room contained no furniture or lockers and was lit only by a pair of dim windows set into the wall near the ceiling. It had 2 doors, the one she was looking through and another leading out to a 2nd-story staircase. Anna had no idea what the original intent for this space had been, storage perhaps, but the gathered dust provided ample evidence that no one had been here in quite a long time. For her purpose, it was ideal, out of the way and private. In fact, she had first found it when she and Carrie had stopped an illegal mod sale going down here a few years back. That had been a nasty case involving mods to hack city authorizations and superheat power transfer lines. If they hadn't caught it in time, a malicious user might have caused fires or even explosions in any number of highly populated areas of the city. Both the modder and the buyer were still serving time and would be for years to come. Tonight, she would make an illicit trade of her own. A shimmer by the doorway opposite hers served as an alert to tell her she wasn't alone. It was the telltale trace of an invisibility mod, the very same she'd used the week before at Shaw's apartment. She stood still, listening to make sure no one else was around. After a handful of seconds, she fully disassembled the door. "Drop the weapon!" watching the blemishes of light as they moved wraith-like toward her, materializing into a figure draped in a long coat with a hat pulled low. She removed the sword hilt from her waist and held it out as if it were an offering. Without making a sound, the modder reached forward and took it from her outstretched hand. As soon as their hands connected, a shout rang out from behind Anna, sending a surge of adrenaline through her body.